I'd like to begin this evening with a bit of the reading that we use for evening prayer. We use Psalm 71. And I'd like to read just a portion of that. Because I just, I read through scriptures, and certainly I think it's my own perspective that makes me notice some things more, though. It says, this is Psalm 71, verses 18 to 19. Now that I am old and my hair is gray, don't leave me, God. I must tell the next generation about your power and greatness. God, your goodness reaches far above the skies. You have done wonderful things. God, there is no one like you. But it's interesting. It starts out, now that I am old and my hair is gray, almost sounds like a lament. But if you continue in the prayer, that's not what it is. I must tell the next generation about your power and greatness. It's like I will still want to have the ability to convey how God has worked in my life. And I just think, yes, that's Psalm 71, verse 18 to 19. Psalm 70. Or if you happen to have that paper, yeah, it's on there too. It's one of the highlighted sections, I believe. What did I do here? Did I mess up something here? I'm going back to the gallery view. I like that one better. Okay, you're not going to be real big now, then, if you say something. I don't want you to feel bashful.
Thank you.
But that sense that being old and gray isn't such a terrible thing. Now, when you were 12 or 14, what was old to you? 30? Sure. When you were 30, what was old to you? 50 or
10
60?
years older than my parents.
I remember when I was about, 40 or so. My dad is about 22 years older than I am, so he'd be 62 or something like that. And we were working together outside, installing a water line. And at one point, we were shoveling the dirt back inside, and it's kind of hot in the afternoon. My dad says, "Tom, take a break." I said, "That's okay, Dad, I'm doing fine." So we shoveled a little bit longer. He says, "Tom, take a break." And I realized he needed a break, but he felt bashful about taking if I was still working. So I didn't catch it the first time. Second time, okay, that's a good idea, Dad. Let's go stand in the shade there. Take a little break. I came down here 20 years later. I'm standing outside shoveling gravel in the parking lot, where it's paved now. It's parking lot. I had to move it around because we had some potholes and whatever. And I'm shoveling. I'm thinking, man, I'm tired. Shoveling a little more. I'm not even sweating. What's wrong with me? I just gotten here. I must be getting old, man. I can't even slow. Finally, I realized two things. One, I was the age of my dad when he was telling me to slow down. And the second, that I was in the Southwest, where the humidity is very low and I wasn't going to be sweating hardly at all. Two things important to remember. But it was that it's relative. I'm 68 now. 62 doesn't sound so old. Yeah, that doesn't sound old at all. It's in a sense our perspective that changes. And I think that's one of the things that Ronald Rolheiser is trying to teach us when he talks about the radical discipleship, the struggles to give our death away. That for some people that sounds morbid, but that's not at all what he's meaning. It's looking at life and death from a different perspective and saying, I want to live fully and to help other people to appreciate not only life, but death and what comes after that. There's a section from Henry Nouwen that I like too. He says, there is such a thing as a good death.
Yep.
We are responsible for the way we die. We have to choose between clinging to life in such a way that death becomes nothing but a failure, or letting go of life in freedom so that we can be given to others as a source of hope. By the way, I don't think I mentioned this earlier. I'm glad to see somebody writing things down. That If you're interested, I can send you my notes. I've got like 10 or 12 pages of notes. And sometimes people find that helpful because, you know, you start reading a book and you think, now where is that in here? You know, you got 300 pages, you don't know where it is. So some of the things I have references, I'll say it's page this or whatever, makes it a little easier to find. I don't think, excuse me? Okay, so I'll probably do that. So that might make it a little bit easier for you. But it's interesting what he says. He says, there is such a thing as a good death. Have you ever seen a, quote, bad death? Have you ever been involved with that with someone who did not die gracefully or well?
Yes.
Would anybody care to describe, you don't have to give any names or anything, of course, but would anybody care to describe someone's dying that did not go so gracefully or peacefully? Now, Jerry, you've dealt with lots of that, I know. Okay, yes, Kitty.
Children getting cancer, babies dying early before they have a chance to live. And his daughter, Smith wasn't her first daughter, sighed and sighed. Lots of priests came to see him. His wife, who was Lutheran, said, you might as well give up on and it was true. He died a very angry
Yeah.
death, and he fought to death. Tooth and nail.
Yeah. Yeah, there are people who do that, who are not accepting of death. They fight it. They're angry. They're upset. They're blaming God. They're blaming someone else. And that's difficult to witness that, to see that. Anyone else? Jerry, did you want to say something? I saw you got your thing on.
Well, I mean, I can tell you, there were a few classic deaths which they died well. My dad died well. He was more than ready to leave. He had done what he was here for. All the family was around, and his cousin showed up with a rose at 6:30, a large red rose, and by 7 o'clock he coughed 3 times and he was gone. And we were all there. It was beautiful.
Sure.
So I'd prefer to remember the good deaths.
Very good. Very good. Thank you, Jerry. It's a wonderful experience to be there in that kind of a situation.
And so when my parents got aged, she ended up taking care of them with my help from time to time. She took care of them for 6 years when they were both together, and then another 3 years with my dad. But I got home one day and she said, I can't move your dad, and I need to move him and put some pillows under him. And so I got up on the bed and I lifted Dad up, and he woke up startled. And he said, Marcos, why did you call me back? I was halfway to your mother when you called me.
Oh, gosh. Mark was talking about his dad had 6 to 9 years of kind of caring for him. And toward the end, his wife asked him to move him, and he picked him up. And his dad said, why did you call me back? I was halfway to your mother, who had already died. And he died 2 days later. Yeah. That's very real. That's very real. I think many of us have experienced death in one form or another with other people. I think the thing is, we need to come to the point of looking at our own attitudes. Sometimes we can help soften others. The guy you mentioned, Kitty, didn't sound like was interested in hearing it. But sometimes people are willing to listen and to change their approach, or we can help them with that. Yes.
It's called Departures, and it's done in English. Japanese film, and it deals with the culture of death in Asian society. It's just a beautiful, beautiful experience. We have these people, they call them dressers, who go to the home of the deceased, and the body is usually laid out on the floor or in a bed, and the dressers actually prepare the body in the presence of the family.
Wow.
They're part of the tradition. But it is one of the most beautiful, sensitive movies I've seen in a long time.
That's great. He's talking about a movie called Departures, about an Asian culture of preparing for death, preparing the body actually for death, after they died in the home. One of you has something beeping in the background. Could you turn off your mic? I don't know. I don't think it's coming from here, is it? I think it's in the background. Somebody's. So whoever got a beeping sound.
I got hearing it.
Oh, I did. Okay. But yeah, I think we had to do that. We have to find ways, look at our own attitudes and the people around us. I'd like for you to take a few minutes. We had the groups as we did. So we can do that again right now. And then just think about both the quote from Scripture, now that I'm old and gray, don't leave me, God. I want to tell the next generation about your power and greatness. And then Henry Nouwen, there is such a thing as a good death. And we are responsible for the way that we die. The question is, how can I live now so that when I die, my death is an optimal blessing to my family, friends, and to the world? That's the question Rolheiser asks. Okay, you got that? How can I live now so that when I die, my death is an optimal blessing to my family, friends, the church, and the world? That's on page 285. No, this is for discussion. I can. How can I live now so that when I die, my death is an optimal blessing to my family, my friends, the church, and the world? Rolheiser answers that on page 285. But I mean, that's his response. But I'd like for you to think about that and separate out in your groups and take 20 minutes or so to talk about that. Does that sound all right? Okay. So what time is it? It is now 7:15? So 5 after 8 or so? No, is that right? No, that's not right. 7:35. Dee, you going to ring the bell again, please? Okay. So this is 20 minutes or so, 25 minutes more. Please come back, and we'll talk about that. Okay, we have the same question here for us. How can we live now?
Remember the last one? We had somebody that gave us the will.
Oh, that's, yeah.
I don't have it right here, so I can't.
Yeah, that was kind of fascinating. I hadn't thought about that. We did talk about that at the retreat. Yeah, people wrote some kind of a, I don't have it with me. I'm not sure what it was. But it was a will to prepare themselves to die. Yeah.
Tom?
Yes.
I'm going to say something which is basically a question.
Yes.
I think that when we come to the subject of death, we have to acknowledge that there are at least two major realities. One is, when I lived and worked in Latin America, on a regular basis, at one point, young people would be shot and killed and left on my doorsteps.
Oh,
I worked with many people who were tortured and died. At one point, over a 6-year period of time, I knew 100 people who had been killed by violence. Now, they did not choose their death,
no.
other than making some of the commitments that they made. So I think that when we come to speak of having to choose our death, we are talking about people who have a certain kind of privilege.
You're right.
A certain kind of privilege, not people who die of starvation when they're 5 years old.
You're right.
Which are many, many people in the world. And so there are those two realities that we deal with. I'm going to call the choice the second one. And I want to say that in my own ministry, I believe I have seen more bad deaths than good deaths.
And I would not be surprised at that.
And the many people, sometimes quoting Dylan Thomas saying, "Do not go gentle into that old night." Go out kicking and screaming and do not want to let go in any way. Right. There are few people who I have encountered who would say, you know, my life is in the hands of God. I trusted God. In this life, I now turn my life and soul into the hands of God, into the loving one who brought me into this world will now take care of me. And I think that learning to die, when we were in that group that didn't starve to death when we were young, learning to die is a very difficult task.
It is.
And we need perhaps more education in the Tibetan Book of the Dead or whatever that enables us to see that. And I was fascinated by Ron's giving away your death.
That's right.
I think that we're called to die in character. And in other words, if we've given our lives in compassion, we should die compassionately. And that we leave that mark, that we can let go. We can let go of many things. And we can in fact let go finally of being in this life. But that's a difficult thing. It's not an easy thing.
Oh, I don't pretend it is either. Just a sec. Keep on going. I got to go close the door. Somebody propped it open. But go on, keep on going. Okay,
well, that's about all I had to say, actually. Well, I find it fascinating about how you give your death away.
Yeah. Henry, I found your comment interesting because your comment about learning how to die, because I've learned how to die from several people, how to die with dignity, how to die on your own terms. My great-great aunt who died of cancer was a very, very dignified woman by the time she passed. Her only whim was she decided that she was going to quit shaving, and she died with a beautiful little Fu Manchu. But she was dignified. So many of my friends in the 80s died of AIDS.
Yep.
And I learned from them how to die. Some of them died kicking and screaming. Others of them died with with a huge amount of dignity. And others died by their own hand rather than torture their family and friends with the long drawn out process. And you learn from every person who you help during that period of their lives.
Yeah, I think many of us have experienced someone else's death that didn't go so well, perhaps. I'd like to ask the question more, as I said precisely, what can I do to prepare myself or maybe someone around me?
Father Tom, yes, I'll share an experience because in my 40s, I had tried to commit suicide more than once.
Wow.
At some point in prayer and in rosary to Mother Mary, God healed me of the desire to want to die. He healed me of the desire to commit suicide. It was a slow process, but there was a healing. So that later on in life, like when my mother passed away 5 years ago, and the grief was so bad, I thought, oh, I want to die. And then I got really angry because I couldn't have that feeling anymore. There was no, I couldn't explain it. That's when I realized that there was a total healing of that darkness in whoever I was at one time, so that even when I wanna die, I can't have that desire anymore. So now I'm interested to find out when God says to me, or I get this feeling I'm gonna live to 106 and I've got all these ailments, and I'm thinking, and we're thinking about giving away our death, and I'm thinking, well, he's giving me this friend, I call him arthritis. And I'm thinking to myself, well, if I'm gonna live to 106 and this is the only ailment I have, I think he's actually continuing to heal that desire for a darkness. And so now maybe I can move towards a lightness, a light.
Good. Thank you. And that's a significant shift. That's part of what I was talking about, is that we change our attitudes, our approach, and so that we can die more gracefully.
I have some comments. At this stage in my life, I really look forward to seeing the Lord.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like I'm still having a good time too. So, I mean, I'm really okay about staying, and I feel like I'm really okay about going. I don't look forward to the dying process in particular, but I think that it's the relationship we have with God here and now that really prepares us to be ready to face him, because death is just the ultimate unknown. And so I think I certainly think it helps us to prepare if we pray for a holy death, if we pray for God to be with us, and you know how we are now with God is how we're going to feel when we're dying. If we haven't been very involved with him, we're going to be scared because we're going to be afraid that we've waited too long. I don't think God thinks the way that we do, but if we're close to him now, we'll feel close to him then, I think.
Very good. I think that's very true. Yeah. It's not like it's going to automatically change 2 days before, but that's why I think we need to prepare. Not that we're, any of us, expecting to die in the next few weeks or few months by any means, but we still prepare our heart and our soul.
I also wanted to say, though, that the instinct to live is so strong. I don't think we should make any judgments about people who seem to struggle at the end and want to keep their life, because it's such a natural instinct, especially when people have someone to take care of, or they just don't feel like they've done what they're supposed to do. You know, it's like when you hear about people drowning, they struggle and then they're at peace, you know, and then they don't drown. And so you hear the story, but, you know, everything's different from God's perspective.
Oh, and I don't want to judge anyone else by any means, you know, say they didn't do it well or whatever.
Father Tom?
Yes.
Something that really helped me is a book that it's titled The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. And something that I've been trying to do and to apply in my life is this research about the regrets of the dying people. And the first one is, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me.
Okay.
The second one is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard, work with purpose and intention and simplicity. The third one is, I wish I would have the courage to express my feelings with no guilt and to look for those gifts in disguise. The fourth is, I wish I would stay in touch with my friends true friends and allow myself to find those that I consider not to really be my friends. And the last one is, I wish I had let myself be happier, the happiness of the now, and to accept the changing times. Then this really helped me, because this is a study, it's a book based on research and data about all those regrets that people dying are regretting. Yes,
Sure.
then that helped me.
If you think about it, Vivian, thank you. I'd not heard those before. If you could write those down and send them to me, then I can send them
Sure.
around to other people. Yeah.
I'd love to have those too. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask, there's some people here whose pictures I can't see because you don't have your video on. That's fine. But any of you like to say something? I don't call on you because I can't tell if you're, if you're interested or not.
I just have one more comment.
Yes.
Emma was one of my favorite patients, and she lived to be 102. But she said, she was very, very devout. She said, I'm heaven ready, but not in a hurry. That's good.
That sounds like what you're saying, Lynn. Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
I didn't always feel the way I did now, though. When I was younger, I was very much afraid of death. And it was, I think, a feeling of there was something I needed to do or something I hadn't finished. A lot of different things. That's come to me in recent years. It wasn't always there.
That's character. Somebody said something about character or wisdom. Yeah.
This is Henry again. Just briefly, Martin King would say over and over again that if you did not have that for which you were willing to give your life, you did not have that for which you were willing to live.
Yes.
And I think that one of the realities that facing us now is that those of us who have choice, if we are not giving our lives to save the earth, then we're going to witness massive deaths in a way that we have never seen before. There are now studies that show very clearly the millions of people who will die in the next 15 years unless there's radical change. And we, as a country, are moving backwards and not forward. And so we're going to be shortly at the point where we're not only building walls, but we'll be shooting climate refugees because we don't want them in this country. And that death will become all pervasive.
Yeah, I hope we don't do that. But I understand what you're saying. Yeah. Yes, Keith.
Well, I have maybe a little different perspective. I want to live to be 100 myself. And the reason is that since I work for the government, I want them to have to pay their pension for a long time.
Well, you get your money's worth. Is that what you're saying?
The other thing is, yeah, when I do go, it's like one of the old, the doctors say they got good news and bad news. You're going to go to heaven, but the idea is that when is the question is you're going to go today. That's not the good, that's the bad news. It's going to be today. But anyway, I think I'd like to be on a cruise ship and maybe plop over with a heart attack on one of the decks, walking around and eating after supper. But that's if I were to just do that. But I have no great fear of death because I've had a couple of operations when the guy told me, said, well, clean your room up because you may not go back to it after the thing. And I like that. So that was remember the last thing I remember throwing some t-shirts and shorts in the hamper so I wouldn't think I lived in a total sty or anything when I didn't come back to the room. But as it turned out, it bounced back okay. But I think that's, they say sometimes looking in the eyeball that you may not be coming back from the hospital is kind of a bone-chilling type thing.
It is.
But anyways, I think they have a lighthearted approach to it. It's do what you're supposed to do, and then, God will sort it out. I don't worry about it too much. But I do like the idea of maybe living to 100, so the government's got to pay me that.
Good for you.
Okay.
Good for you, Keith. Oh, yeah.
Father Tom?
Yes.
What I discovered, and I kind of mentioned this earlier this morning, was that while I learned about death from so many people, I didn't really feel it myself until I had cancer 11 years ago, which that tends to throw your mortality right in your face, real up front. Because even when they say they can cure you with chemo, chemo is a race. What's going to die first, the cancer or you? Because chemo's poison.
Yeah.
And it's very, it makes you do a lot of reflection and a lot of what you want your life to have meant.
Yep.
And if you have any regrets, I'm lucky. I survived. I'm doing great. And so I have a chance to try to move on past any regrets and go back and pick up those things.
Very good. Thank you. Sister Dorothy, did you have something you wanted to say?
I've had the, I guess I would say, somewhat of a privilege to journey with many of my sisters because I was local minister in the convent, the Care Center convent. And so I've had the grace to accompany a lot of our sisters home to God. You know, some of the deaths, you know, were gentle and some of them were difficult in terms of the physical process of the death. But I've also have realized that because I've had the opportunity to get to know the sisters in their final years and learn some of their stories if I did not have the opportunity to live with them, is that you know, sometimes they die as they lived, and sometimes that was not the case. However, because I knew them, it was sometimes maybe a death that, like Jesus's death was, is that he took on a lot of pain and transformed that pain. And so then those difficult deaths may have been something very transformational other than what they seem to be. Okay? And then in terms of my own, I've tried to parent myself, if you will, to try to live more in the present moment as fully as I can. I'm not always successful because sometimes I get anxious about one thing or the other in terms of the future. But so I'm hoping that in that effort, that whenever it is time, that I'll be more or less prepared because I'm trying to be true to the moment, if you will.
Good, very good. To live each day, it's a full.
Yes.
Chabela.
I really need to distinguish the physical component of death from the inner relation and waiting time, no? Because I am a nun and God was really somebody very important through all my life since my adolescence. I cannot say that I will be so happy if tomorrow I am with the Lord, but I am not so happy about what will be the pain, the diminutions, the etc., no? So spiritually speaking, it is a different story than really physically speaking. So when we are talking now about giving our deaths as our life, I don't think that is in our way. It's in my way to decide how I will die, you know. But now that I am older, I understand that spiritually speaking, the Lord is taking a lot of myself through the daily life. And all those struggles that you were speaking, Father Tom, I think that is giving our life day by day. When I fight with myself and I say again and again and another time, that is a struggle of purifying myself through the experiences of daily. So that's a component in my life that is still very energetic in one way, of death, that is presence. Present, sorry. So that distinguish, I don't know, I will be happy if we can find a little more about that.
Sure. It's interesting as you were talking, Sister Chabela, I was thinking of how Ron Rolheiser calls it the struggle to give our death away. He doesn't say this is a joy. He doesn't say it's something that is easy or that we look forward to, acknowledging the struggle, but that we can do it, we can prepare ourselves to do it as best we can. And I think that's what it does, that it gives us that opportunity.
I'd like to say something about dementia as a grace before death. And this is from observing my mother-in-law. She had senile dementia, not Alzheimer's, for maybe 3 or 4 or 5 years before she died. And she couldn't make any new memories. So like Father, what you were talking about with Father Ivan,
right?
They don't remember what they just said. But all the memories that she had before she had dementia were still there. And many traumatic memories that she never would have told me came out when she had dementia. And she would tell these stories over and over. And of course, we learned to listen as if we'd never heard them before. And I really came to see it as a healing of memories in a way. It was very interesting. It's like this isn't something we do voluntarily, but it was the only memories she had, and she would just keep processing them. I came to see it as a grace for her, not something you'd certainly want for yourself, but there's grace in all kinds of things that we don't often think of that way.
Thank you for saying that, Lynn. I'd never thought of that, people repeating stories like that as kind of a healing of memories, but I can see how that would be very possible.
In some ways, I felt like I never knew her before she had dementia because of the things she shared that she never would have ever talked about before.
Yeah, sure. Vivian?
Father Tom, I completely agree with Sister Chabela, what she was saying, because I don't know if you have seen this image of this nun, really young, that passed with this smile, even that she was struggling with cancer or something like that. And that is something that hits me also. The Sister Chabela's question about this double dimension between pain. When you are really in this physical pain, how can you sublimate it, or how can you elevate it, or I don't know the word to use it, to really have like an experience, like a God's inspiring experience, instead of really blaming what is going on, because it's normal. When we saw the Pope hitting the hand of this lady when she pulled him to I don't know if you remember that image. I mean, because he felt pain and he was just like, ouch. Then exactly the same. I mean, if we are struggling with pain, how I completely agree that if we can maybe get deeper in some point, or maybe another retreat into that area, I will really appreciate that.
Okay. All right. We have people starting to walk back in. Any other final comments before they all get in here?
Well, I had cancer, breast cancer, when I was 50, and my kids, nobody had gotten married or anything. And so I picked up a kid when I was 40 and made her my granddaughter. But I was pretty determined to have a granddaughter, and all of a sudden my son, my middle son, had a child. And I thought, So I stayed sick for a while, and the other two got married and had kids, and then I got well.
Uh-huh.
I know that's awful, but they gave me 10 years and it was like 26 years ago. So.
Wow. Well, you did all right then. You invested those 10 years very well. Turned 10 into 26.
Down the road, you turn around and go back.
Okay, I think everybody's coming in. It's going to get a little noisy here in a second. Thank you all very much. Father Christopher, did you want to say anything else before we cut off? That's cute.
Ethical wills. That's it.
Any just kind of general comments? I'm not expecting you to relay anything specific about. Was that a helpful discussion to talk about that? Many of us don't really talk about it until we're faced with it and we don't have any choice. But I think there's a value in looking at it. So we'll continue this discussion tomorrow morning as well on this. But I think it's very worthwhile to look at that and to think about it and prepare ourselves as best we can. I'll do this first. Ronald Rolheiser also says, we reach the point of realizing that we don't have, have to be productive, but we can share character. Reach the point we don't have to be productive. I don't have to accomplish anything specifically, but we can share character. That doesn't mean being a character. That means sharing that depth of your life that touches other people. And I think that's something that's well and very helpful. We reach the point of realizing that we don't have to be productive, but we can share character. Character as a strength of character, or as a wisdom as well. That's page 291 is where he says that. And I think that's helpful to know. There's a book, I got lots of books I like. This is called Sabbath by Wayne Mueller. And you all know what Sabbath, of course, is, the Jewish tradition, the day of rest. The Lord rested on the seventh day. In the United States, we've lost some of that sense of Sabbath. As most of us were growing up, a lot of things were closed on Sunday. And so it was a day of rest. It wasn't a day of work for most people. Lots of people work on Sunday now. Lots and lots of people. There's a few businesses that choose not to. There's a guy named Wade Daw, owns Daw's Furniture in El Paso, some of you might recall. And at least, I presume he still does, but he used to have a sign on his door that says, we're closed on Sunday so that we can spend it with our families and go to church. Good for you. I think that's a choice to do that. Say it again. Chick-fil-A, thank you. Hobby Lobby, yeah. There's a few others that choose to do that. And I think that's showing the values of their owners, of the people. And I think that we should, in our own life, say, how can I make this day different? How can I take a Sabbath day? Now, for me, Sunday's a work day most of the time. And so that's not my Sabbath as in rest and time for prayer, but I go to our hermitage or someplace else once a month for 2 nights in a day, and that's my Sabbath. But it might be on a Monday or a Tuesday or Wednesday or some other day, rarely on a Sunday. Doesn't necessarily have to be on that particular day, even though it's traditionally so. But I think there's a real value in choosing to do that. And not because we're lazy, not because we want to sleep all day, but to give ourselves that time of rest and focus on prayer, on writing, or just appreciating simple things. He says, finding rest, renewal, and delight in our busy lives. Yeah, nice thing to do. And I think if we do that all the time, then even as we're approaching death or dying, it's not like, well, I can't do anything anymore. I'm too weak, or I'm too old, or whatever, I'm too sick. But if we recognize that there is value to our life on a Sabbath day, then say, well, there's a value to my life on this day, whatever that day is. It may involve walking or entering the dark night of the soul, as John of the Cross would say, or the dark night of the spirit. Not all deaths are going to be peaceful. We know that. Not all deaths are going to be welcomed in some fashion because of either the suddenness of them, the pain that's involved, the inner turmoil that someone is experiencing, the lack of reconciliation that is still there. I don't know how many people, relatively speaking, have a peaceful death relative to those where it's not. I have no idea. But it's obvious there's quite a few that are not. But it says if we need to prepare ourselves to live as fully as we can. And our faith is a big part of that. Jesus approached his dying, and that certainly wasn't pleasant. Torture and rejection and abandonment. Even on the cross, somebody challenging him, hey, you could save yourself and save us. And perhaps some serious questioning. My God, why have you forsaken me? But finally able to come to the point of peace. Into your hands I commend my spirit. I think that's what we, in a sense, we look toward. But we need to keep our faith as part of that. It's not just our faith is something we just hang on to when there's nothing else to do. But it needs to be an integral part of our living and our dying in a real way. Tomorrow we're going to be talking a little bit more about this same thing and radical discipleship, thinking that how is this a discipleship? How is it a ministry or a gift to other people? Because it can be that. It can be in a very real way. And I think that's beautiful when it is. For some, I feel healthy right now, but I don't know what I will be. But I do want to be prepared when the time comes. There's a story, one last little story, and then we'll take a break. There was a monk out hoeing in the garden. And one of the other younger monks asked him, brother, he says, if you knew today was your last day of living, what would you do? And you know what he did? He kept on hoeing. Because that's what he felt was the best thing to do. That's what he was prepared for that day. And it's not like, oh, I got to go call these people. I got to go see this people. I better go confession. I need to. He'd keep on hoeing. Perhaps this evening you can pray and reflect about how, if this were my last day, would I be ready? Is there something I need to do? Or would I want to say, Lord, can you give me a couple more days? I need a little more time here. Or would you be able to say, I would keep on hoeing? Okay. And I think that preparation, and when we think about that, makes us able to be at peace whenever that time might come. Okay? Okay, anything else before we conclude for the evening? May the blessing of the Lord be upon you. I bless you in the name of the Lord. May the blessing of the Lord be upon you. I bless you in the name of the Lord.